Hello and welcome to another edition of Last Bell Boxing. We're joined by our usual guests, Carl.
Good evening.
Andy.
How you doing, Ray?
We've got some new guests with us. Imran, how are you doing?
How's it going, Ray?
Not too bad, not too bad. And Cedric Ben, all the way from Canada, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again.
Right, the topic for us is the WBA have recently announced that they're removing the interim titles that they currently operate in all their divisions. They've announced that they're removing 24 titles, which is it's a much needed move in boxing, but it still feels like a bit of a shock. So that's one that we're going to throw upon. So Cedric, I'll just come to you to discuss it. It's a funny one because it feels like a bit of a shock, but it's a much needed move.
It is because it seems like every other year they were finding another way to add some type of belt into the mix, kind of under the radar, and the thing is for true boxing fans like us, we know who all the good fighters are, even if the ones that don't have the belts yet, we know who the good fighters are. But I think for the general public, it's hard for them to understand who's the better boxer when every time they turn on the screen, a different guy has a belt, no-name guy has a belt in his wrapped around his waist. So this is I'd say small step and a big step at the same time. Small step because it's only one of the sanctioning bodies that's doing it, but a big step in a way that hopefully the other organizations will follow suit and get rid of all these titles to help the general public understand who actually is the best fighter at that division. Removing 24 titles. There was 24 interim belts. Wow, that's crazy. That is, I didn't even realize. And again, I'm involved as a coach, as a spectator, as an athlete, and I didn't even realize how many belts there were. And sometimes I'm confused on who has the interim or normal or whatever super champion. So, anyways, I'm just glad this is the first step in the right direction. So,
Imran, how about yourself? What your thoughts on it?
I think it's a step in the right direction, to be honest. For example, one of the names that actually had this interim belt was Daniel Dubois, and he was the WBA interim champion. And what I don't understand is how did he get a belt? He lost his last fight.
He won his last fight.
Sense. Okay, sorry, he won his last fight. The fight before that, he lost to Joe Joyce. But what I mean is the fight that he had prior, the last fight he had, wasn't deserving of a belt. So now when you're a casual boxing fan, you're thinking to yourself, oh, is this guy a champion? And really, we know that he's nowhere near world title level. He's nowhere near championship level. But yeah, he's got a belt. And then there's Chris Eubank as well. Chris Eubank is a lot closer to a championship level than Daniel Dubois, but still, he's not a champion. And then there's a regular champion and a super champion. For example, in the featherweight division, we got Lee Wood as a regular champion and Leo Santa Cruz as a super champion. Who's the champion? There's one guy that hasn't fought for 2 years, and there's one guy that recently won a regular title. I'm a little bit confused. I don't know who the champions are. I don't know what's going on. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but we also now need to have a look at the regular belts and the super champion. It's just really confusing. Having 4 governing bodies with 4 different belts is confusing enough. The fact that WBA have 3-4 belts, it's just it just seems a bit pointless. So it's a step that they've taken away the interim belts. Now they need to look at the super champions and the regular champions and have a look at that, because otherwise, who's the champion? Who's the champion? Lee Wood or Santa Cruz? I don't. I'm a bit who's the champion? So this is what I'm saying. I think they need to clean it up a little.
Okay. Cheers for that, Imran. Andy, so there's 24 titles that have been removed, and there's only 17 weight categories.
Well, that just
in boxing. So clearly, there's a couple of divisions that are being a bit greedy there.
That sums it up. Right? It sums it up.
Just before I finish there, you've had Silvio on the show, who's been a boxing manager. He's dabbled his hand in promoting to a very, very good level as well. Now, from what I know, the WBA were big on having these interims and the regular belts to give those boxers from continents where the promoters perhaps aren't as big, aren't as powerful, to give them a chance to have a ranking, to have a shot at the full or recognised WBA belt. So how do you think that could help or hinder those boxers in those situations?
You know what, Ray? That's absolute bull. They're saying that to hide behind the fact that all they wanted to do is drag more money in. That's all this comes down to. They're making more fights, they're making more fight nights, and they're getting more revenue. That's all it is. Nothing else. All they're doing is they're watering down what should be a champion. Look at this. Look at the saga the crap that Lee Woods had to take since he's become a world champion. And let's just put this to bed for once and for all. Lee Wood beat Zucan, who was rated in the top 3, or in the top pound for pound fighters. He didn't beat nobody for the title. He beat a live champion. And then you got Leo Santa Cruz, who's the super champion, sitting on his butt for 2 years, or going up to another weight and having one fight, which I believe he lost, to then come back down and still keep the belt. That don't work. What they should be doing is they should be making Leo Santa Cruz fight Lee Wood. And if you don't want to, they should be stripping him and they should be making Lee Wood the super champion. But they don't want to do that, Ray, because all they want to do is get more money. That's all the WBA, that's the whole point of this. All these belts that are flying around. That's the only reason they do it. They don't need 2 champions in the same WBA. Don't need 2 champions, but they do it to make money.
Carl, cheers for that, Andy. Carl, obviously the WBA have taken this route. Do you see this as being inevitable that the other 3 major bodies will take this route? And also, what do you think of sort of Boxing News is our main boxing publicist in this country? They've taken the stance that they're not recognising any belts, and then they're just doing their own rankings on who they perceive to be the best. So will it be a point where people will just be looking at something like the Ring magazine and judging that as a gauge to see who the best in the weight class is, rather than looking at who the WBO is, or the IBF or the WBC?
I think if the other governing bodies do follow suit, it will make boxing a lot simpler for starters. You know, boxing is going through a tough time at the minute. You know, especially it's going through a bit of an identity crisis for me when you start having YouTubers fighting UFC stars. I'll give you an example. You go onto BT website today, it's got the Paul fight all over it, yet you can't find info on the BT fight night on Saturday night. So I think other governing bodies should follow suit. I think it will hopefully bring a unified champion a bit closer because there's not all these belts. Looking at who got stripped by the WBA, you've also got Michael Conlan in there. You got Virgil Ortiz in there. So obviously some good fighters have been stripped, but just let the best fight the best. And for Boxing News, who are they to come up with who's the best fighter? Surely, if the best fighter's the best, we'll know who's the best fighter because they'll be holding the belt. You know,
I think it's a smart move by Boxing News. I think it's brave. I think what they're trying to say is there's so much confusion.
I think it's undermining
the bodies. I think what they're trying to say is they're trying to use their audience to say, look, we just had enough. This is who we think are the best division. We're simply not just going to recognise all these, diamond. Yeah. I mean, for all the stuff that we give the WBA, the WBC have got to be held accountable as well.
I just find it a little bit undermining. Boxing News publication are going to start making our minds up who's going to be top of the division. I think it's been good enough for how many years, Ray? Why start changing it now? I just think it just needs streamlining. You know, people are picking up belts after, like Dubois, comes off a bad defeat against Joe Joyce, wins a fight against, let's have it, Truth, and nobody, and picks the belt up.
It's a joke, isn't it? It's a joke.
So when we're going to get back to the top one in the division, is going to be the belt holder. Forget about all this diamond crap and all that lot. Let's just have one belt per governing body, and then we know exactly who's the kingpin in that governing body at that weight.
I mean, what did them interim belts mean anyway? It didn't mean that they were next in line to take a shot at the champion.
Tell me what it did for Dillian White.
Absolutely nothing, mate. That was what I was just about to say. Dillian White waits nearly 3 years with an interim championship belt over his shoulder. It did nothing for him.
It smacks of people protecting that O, don't it? Like Diaz says, the trouble is with boxing today is that people protect the O's rather than jumping and test how good they are. You know, they pick up these belts. I mean, don't get me started on Chris Eubank Jr. with the IBO, calling himself a world champion when he had the IBO belt.
Speaking of the IBO, Cedric, do you still think there's a need for the 4 governing bodies? Or do you think, looking at the UFC, do you think there's more of a temptation to have just one that rules all?
I mean, ideally, yes, it would be easier for everyone to follow if it was just one sanctioning body, unless they were just willing to all fight with each other, which it doesn't seem like. But so I mean, yeah, I guess ideally, as long as the fighters get my only concern is that you know, I don't want boxing to turn into a monopoly like the UFC where the owners can just blatantly underpay the fighters and they can't do anything about it because there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
So that's the only concern there. That, you know, the reason why boxers can still get paid. You know, everyone talks about MMA is more popular, but the reason why boxers can still get more paid is because they have different options to go make more money over there. So that way this promoter has to pay me this money because I can go elsewhere and get more money. So that's where the business part comes into it, right?
Yeah. Imran, what your thoughts on that, mate? Just what I asked Cedric.
Sorry, say that question again.
So, are you happy with the fact that we got 4 major governing bodies, or would you just prefer the one? How would boxing work for you?
To be honest, I would prefer the 4. I don't mind having 4 governing bodies: the IBF, WBO, WBA, WBC. I don't mind that. It's just the fact that they're bringing out 4 titles for each governing body. So like the WBA have like 3, like we just said, they have the interim title, regular, super champion. I don't really like that. If there was 1 title per governing body, that's fine, because remember, Ray, there's competition. There's not. I feel like for me, 4 champions. I actually prefer it. I think there's competition, and it looks good when someone like Josh Taylor wins 4 belts.
Yeah,
it's more of a feel-good factor. Whereas like winning one, like if you win 1 belt, it doesn't. Yeah, you feel like, yeah, I'm the champion. But I just feel like having 4 belts, it feels like more.
It's a greater achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Undisputed,
so,
that undisputed title.
Boxing just needs cleaning up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because depending on who you're with, it depends on what treatment you get from the governing body. Example: Tyson Fury beats Klitschko. All of a sudden, all his mandatories have to be fought the following week, or so he gets stripped. I dare say that Anthony Joshua has been given a little bit of a kinder treatment. Now, whether that's because of his promoter, I don't know. But all I'd say is boxing needs to clean itself up a little bit.
He's the money man, isn't he? Though, like the government. That's what I was saying about. Andy made a point about Lee Wood and Leo Santa Cruz. There's no way the WBA are going to strip Leo Santa Cruz, is because they know he's a big star, and they know that for them he brings a lot. They want him to be their champion. The same thing they did with Luke Campbell and Lomachenko is that they made Luke Campbell should have fought for the WBC champion. He probably would have been a champion right now. But what they did is they made the WBC title, right, for the Luke Campbell and Lomachenko fight because they felt Lomachenko was going to beat Campbell, so they wanted Lomachenko to hold their belt. So they do things to suit their interest. You see what I'm saying? Whereas if there was somebody else that wasn't as politically connected as Leo Santa Cruz, Lee Wood would probably be the super champion. But because Leo Santa Cruz is so politically connected and he's a money man, he's a big name in the sport of boxing. You know, you could even say he's a legendary boxer in terms of what he's achieved in boxing in terms of accomplishments. But that's why they're not going to do it, because he's a politically connected fighter. That it's not right, but that's what they do. They do things to suit their own interests. It started
with Floyd Mayweather. Don't forget. I mean, when he went to prison for domestic abuse. He was elevated up to being a WBC champion emeritus because the WBC loved Floyd Mayweather. He brought in a lot of money. His sanctioning fees were obviously quite high. So similar to what Imran's saying, he was elevated up, which meant that when mandatories needed to be fought for the WBC and Mayweather couldn't fight him because he was fighting off in another weight category, they were still WBC champions, but then Mayweather could still call himself a WBC champion in the same weight class. So it's strange, isn't it? Because if you know, the most prestigious belt, the WBC, even is guilty of its own, and hopefully if they clean up the belt situation, they can clean up the ranking situation as well.
Yeah.
I think Imran's got a really good point. These governing bodies, they pick and choose who they want to be their champion, and they maneuver fights and they maneuver promoters to make the fights they want them to make, so that they get the champion that they want at any given time.
Well, Andy, let's use WBCs as an example. You know I'm not Dillian White's biggest fan, but how can you be throwing Dominic Brazilian before him?
Disgraceful, mate. It's disgraceful. And that was all because they knew full well Dillian White would have given Deontay Wilder a real tough night, and Brazil wasn't going to do that, was it?
Yeah. All right then, gents. Well, thank you very much for that. So that's the end of that little debate there. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys shortly.
Cheers.
Cheers.